Our next speaker is from Monterey. She does thewhip.net. Welcome, Kate Daniels.
But thank you, Darius, for that introduction, and it's really an honor to be here at Bonfire Heights and to have been invited to participate in this weekend's events. I feel really blessed that I'm surrounded by so many people who care about the things that I care about, and I was so moved, Taryn, just sitting on the other side of this wall, listening to your story, because it's stories like that that we publish on our website. It's stories that maybe get press when they happen because it's some kind of atrocity or it's something that's very sensational. But these stories often then get forgotten about, but they're impacting real people's lives on a daily basis. And so our writers like to keep the story going. And they do so in a way that's uniquely personal. We all in this room, I'm sure, feel like I feel right now, that I know you and I know Michael, and the story is very real for us because of the way you told it. And this is not how I planned on introducing my talk, but it's really important to note that that kind of storytelling leaves a lasting impression on people, and it makes us want to act. It makes us want to change the reality, and those are the kinds of stories that the women are regularly telling on our publication, which is thewhip.net. So as I was saying when I got up here, it's really wonderful to be around people who care about the same things that I care about, whether it's ending wars and saving lives and creating peace, or whether it's protecting the environment, or working to help child refugees. We all care about the same kind of things, and we're all working toward the same kind of world. But I'm willing to wager that if I were to ask all of you if you were feminists, not many of you would raise your hand in this room. There's probably some of you that would raise your hand, but the kind of people that are on the front lines fighting for gender equality is few and far between, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that we think of gender equality as a fight for women's rights. And when we think about it as a fight for women's rights, it's marginalized. It's thought of something that's going to benefit only women if we rectify some of the issues that are facing women worldwide. And what we do at the Whip and how I perceive this issue is very different. I don't see the fight as fighting for women's rights as something that's going to benefit only women. I perceive it as something that's going to benefit all of society. And so what I hope that I can share with you today is that women are a largely untapped natural resource, that if we understand them better and empower women, we're going to be working towards solutions for all the issues that every single person in this room cares about. So that's my vision. Thank you. But I do want to say that I didn't always feel this way. When I started out in this project, when I started out creating the Women's International Perspective, I was just getting off of a very short internship at the Huffington Post, which I'm sure that you're all familiar with, the publication that was early on in the blogosphere. And when I finished that internship, I was merely disappointed that there weren't more women lighting up the blogosphere. And then one day I was traveling to visit a colleague in Spain, and I came across something in the airport that changed my vision for this project entirely. I was running for the plane, and I came across a billboard. And on that billboard was a woman from Africa looking back at me as I ran by. And it was for the humanitarian organization CARE. And at the bottom, it read, "Women are the most underutilized natural resource in the world." When I saw that, my vision for this project changed from merely what was an act of justice to what I saw as could be a movement for change. In that instant, it became so clear to me what is missing when women's voices are underrepresented. It's our perspectives, it's our ideas, but most importantly, it's our solutions for all of the great problems, whether they're economic or environmental, that we're facing worldwide. So in my talk today, what I'd like to do is introduce to you several of the women that I've met along this journey who have taught me why it is and how it is that women can make the needed difference in all the issues that you and I care about. Why is it important that we fight for gender justice? Why is it important that we empower women worldwide? And hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate to you that by focusing on women, by empowering women, we can make a difference in the world that we all live in and rectify, if not resolve, the issues that you and I all care about. I'm going to start with Dr. Riane Eisler, and I'm going to use my notes. I know everyone's been so fantastic up here without their notes, but I don't want to miss anything. Maybe I'll get rid of them as I'm talking, but we'll see. I first met Dr. Riane Eisler the very first day that the WIP was online. It was our first day publishing Women's Voices and Perspectives, and we had a little get-together for all the people in our community to come hear about our publication. So, as most of you know who've started projects and websites, everyone in that room had no idea why they were there. They had no idea what we were doing. They were there probably for the food. And I got up in front, and I didn't know, I hadn't lived in our hometown for a long time, and I got up in front of the room, in front of all the people, and I started talking about our vision for this publication. And I noticed a woman, she had sort of this reddish hair and big round glasses, and she was sitting in the front row, and she appeared to be nodding her head up and down in agreement with everything that I was saying. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't realize until after I'd finished talking that she was the eminent Dr. Riane Eisler, social scientist, attorney, author, and activist. Since that time, I've read her books, I have interviewed her a few times, and I've learned a lot about her work. And what I find is the most critical component of her work and what she talks about is that in this society that we live in, we subscribe to a gendered system of values. And what that means is that we subscribe, for example, to economic systems that place a higher value on those things that are masculine versus those things that are feminine. If you're not familiar with her work, her best-selling book, The Chalice and the Blade, among many others, explores how deep patterns of cultural values and beliefs impact human beings. Her passion for this work started at an early age with the Nazis' occupation of her native Austria and later as a refugee living in Cuba. And what her quest has been to understand why, when we humans have such a great capacity for caring, consciousness, and creativity, has our world seen so much cruelty, insensitivity, and injustice. Regarding economics, which this section of my talk I'd like to be focusing on women and the economy, she proposes that we shift to an economic system that accomplishes what economic systems are supposed to do, to provide for human welfare, for human development, and for a sustainable and healthy natural environment. Now, like myself, I'm sure all of you in this audience are beginning to realize that our current economic systems are not working. Yet, while this Great Recession has been very painful for a lot of us, it does offer us a window of opportunity to create the kind of change that Riane is talking about. She calls it our real wealth. And what she calls our real wealth consists of the contributions of people and of nature. So we need something that we actually haven't had. We need economic systems that give visibility to the real value of the most important human work, which is the work of caring for people, starting in early childhood, and caring for nature. Now, there's a really good example of how this comes to play in our economic systems, and that is occupations that we traditionally think of masculine versus occupations that we traditionally think of as feminine. We think nothing in this country of paying our plumbers or our engineers, the people to whom we entrust our pipes, $50 to $100 an hour. Yet, our caregivers, our elementary school teachers, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, child care workers make on average $10 an hour, and they receive no benefits. And on top of that, we require that our plumbers have some kind of training, and that's something that we don't require of our child care workers. Riane would tell you that this is not logical. In fact, it's pathological. But what is exciting to learn about her research is that she believes that in significant respects, women are actually a better predictor of quality of life actually than GDP. And we see this. There's a growing body of evidence in countries that value caring and caregiving, countries such as Norway and Sweden and Finland. And what we see in these countries are very low poverty rates, long lifespans, students who score high on international education tests. We see low crime rates and a generally good quality of life for all. And in these countries, it's no surprise that they all have government-supported childcare, universal health care, stipends to help families care for children, elder care with dignity, generous paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers, and something that's really important to note is that women in these countries also make up approximately 40% of the legislatures. So, Rian's conclusion, what's good for women is good for the world, and what's bad for women is bad for the world. The next person I'd like to introduce to you is Lema Roberta Bowie. And I first met Lema in 2008. I was in San Francisco, and I was walking down the street, actually, my cell phone rang, and it was a woman from a small film company in New York City called Fork Films. And she was on the line, and she said to me that she was working with Abigail Disney, and they were creating a film called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, and they were looking for partners to help publicize the film, and would the Whip be interested in being a partner? And I, of course, agreed. I had no experience in film, and no one had ever called and asked me to do anything like this, and I was actually just thrilled that they had found the Whip online and were thinking of us for this. And so I got the opportunity to watch this film. And what was exciting to me about this film was it was the first tangible evidence I had. I could see the power of women in action, in this case, working toward peace. Pray the Devil Back to Hell is the story of the brave and visionary women who demanded peace in Liberia after 10 years of civil war. The quest for power by the ruthless dictator Charles Taylor, as well as the rebel warlords, was so great that there was no limits to what these people would not do. And children were kidnapped, they were drugged, they were recruited as child soldiers, women of all ages were raped and abused, villages were burned, and communities were torn apart. Until one day, Christian and Muslim women came together and demanded peace. Now, these are communities that would not ordinarily mix, and they were communities demanding peace that did something that nobody had been able to do, to exile this ruthless dictator and to bring to power the election of a woman, the first female head of state, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, in all of Africa. The principal character in the film, of course, is Lema Bowie, and she was the principal character in the peace process. And she's since spoken at WIP events and contributed to our publication. And she's shared with our community how it is that she helped organize the Liberian Mass Action for Peace, a community organization who really demonstrates this new wave of women taking control of their destiny in a manner that's not often seen. These women even held a sex strike when they couldn't get their husbands to take what they were doing seriously and to get them on board in the peace process. On December 10th of last year, Lema was afforded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work, which was so exciting for us and, of course, for her. But in that address, she cited the late Martin Luther King, who said, "Violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problem. It merely creates more complicated ones." Yet, as you and I know, violence is often a common tactic that we rely on to resolve conflicts. In her Nobel address, she offers this insight as to why women make good peacemakers. She tells us, "We were the conscience of the ones who'd lost their conscience in the quest for power and political positions. We represented the soul of the nation. When confronting warlords, we did so because we felt it was our moral duty to stand as mothers and gird our waist, to fight the demons of war in order to protect the lives of our children, their land, and their future." For me, what Lema demonstrates is the critical, yet largely untapped resource women are in the peacemaking process. The next woman I'd like to introduce you to, and there are only 5, just in case you're getting worried, 5 women, and I'd like to talk briefly about women in leadership. And the woman I'd like to introduce you to is Linda Tarr Whelan. I met Linda Tarr Whelan, one of the many women, female agents of change, who I've come across work in this journey. She's an ambassador. She's been a nurse in different times in her life, a union organizer, a policy expert, a businesswoman, and a consultant. And she's currently chairing a new UN organization, a leadership group called the UN Women's Empowerment Principles Leadership Group. I became interested in Linda's work to understand more fully something that she has coined the 30% solution. And the idea is really simple. She wrote about it in her book, Women Lead the Way, and that is that leadership balance brings greater progress. Now, some of you in this audience might be wondering, if you're fighting for women's rights, why would you fight for only 30% instead of 50% equality in leadership for women? And the reason is that she has found, and research has supported this, that 30% is a tipping point at which women's voices resonate fully and add the affirmative difference of our experiences and our values. Studies have shown that having more women at the top of Fortune 500 companies shows that with 1/3 or more women as corporate officers and directors, they can report higher financial performance and better bottom lines, as well as more opportunity for upward mobility and improved policies for women and family. To answer my question that I originally had asked Linda about leadership in the media, she told me that since only 3% of the clout positions in media are held by men, this skews what news organizations deem is important. And so in media, if women had the critical 30% in leadership positions, undoubtedly the context of the stories that we deliver to the public would be different. You can put it simply that changing who decides changes what is decided. In 2009, one critical question that Linda asks in her book is whether the economic crisis we're still reeling from would have been the same if women were at the top of the companies that led us over the cliff. She answers a question that Nicholas Kristof poses in a February 2009 column, which is, would we be in the same mess if Lehman Brothers were instead Lehman Brothers and sisters? Linda's response, probably not. We can't know for sure, of course, but the outcomes would undoubtedly have been different. Think about the country and where we're at today. The global economy is fragile. There's high unemployment everywhere. War persists. Quality is diminishing. Terrorism is on the rise. Poverty is growing. And our environment, as you can see from this recent terrifying storm that hit the East Coast, is really on the brink of calamity. With this daunting picture, Linda would tell you that it's foolhardy to think that the same people who got us into this mess can get us out of it and will have all the solutions. That's why she's calling for leadership balance. So, what does the world need today? The world needs future-oriented leaders who understand how to build from the bottom up. The world needs smart leaders who can bring people together to meet a shared mission and shared goals. The world needs leaders who will listen well and build consensus, rather than believe they alone know best. These are leaders who will think over the horizon, who will work collaboratively, and who will achieve results that are good for everyone. They're leaders who are problem solvers and work together to strengthen the economy without sacrificing families or communities. What's exciting to note is that, according to Linda, this skill set for the transformational leader that's needed today is exactly in line with what women bring to the table. So her conclusion, new leaders, women leaders, are needed to bring the fresh ideas and creative ideas to meet the challenges that we're facing in our communities, in our countries, and in our companies today. Anne Firth Murray. I'd like to talk a moment about women and social justice. I met Anne Firth Murray when, by chance, at an event in Silicon Valley. I was struggling at the time with fundraising, something I'm still struggling with today, but I was excited to meet the founder of the Global Fund for Women. And the Global Fund for Women is an organization that has raised millions of dollars and given it away to thousands of women's organizations around the globe. I read Anne's 2 books, I wrote a couple of articles, and I invited her to come speak at our International Women's Day event. And in reading her work and talking with her, the correlation, the connection between the status of women and the many problems that we're facing in the world, their connection became very clear. Anne was talking about something that was just a budding notion for me at the time, that poverty, education, climate change, terrorism, all of these things could be improved if we tackle the injustices facing women worldwide. So what are the injustices, according to Anne, that need rectifying? In her book, From Outrage to Courage, she contrasts the persistent poverty, the low status of women, and what women are facing in many countries with the change that's possible when women take collective action. The issues she identifies are the demeaning and disempowerment of girls and women, the persistence of poverty, unequal access to education, food, healthcare, and money, and pervasive violence. And throughout her book, she provides countless examples of community-based women's organizations addressing these health and human rights issues while highlighting the strength and hope women provide for change. Since inception, her organization that she founded has provided nearly $99 million to over 4,500 organizations in 172 countries. This money's been made available to women around the world to change their societies in ways that they define. And what's exciting to discover is that the ways that they define are uniquely feminine. And they're different from the status quo. They're creating organizations and systems that's characterized by compassion, by generosity, by inclusiveness, by diversity, and by respect. So, in conclusion, what Anne has shown me is that if we are interested in transforming our societies, improving the health and well-being of women is the most effective way to leverage that change. Now, the last person that I'd like to share with you is a woman that I work with at my publication, The Women's International Perspective, and her name is Zubeida Mustafa. And just this week, I had a tremendous opportunity to actually go and meet this contributor in Los Angeles on Monday night. And that's not something that I regularly get to do at the WIP. Normally, I communicate with our writers via the internet, we email, sometimes we even Skype, but because there are more than 150 women who contribute to the publication who live in over 40 countries around the world, I don't often get to meet them in person. But Zubeida was invited to the United States to come receive the International Women's Media Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award, which they had at the Beverly Hills Hotel on Monday evening. So I packed my family up, we drove to Los Angeles, and we got to meet one of our writers in person, and it was terribly exciting. But it was exciting for more reasons than just that. I hope that by now you can sort of gather why it is that I find this work so important. I used to, in fact, call myself an environmentalist. That was my first activism. I was a dedicated environmentalist when I was a kid. And what I realize now is that I'm an environmentalist, obviously, still, but I have found something to fight for that in the end, when rectified and resolved, is going to help all of the issues that I care about. So back to Zubeida, she embodies these principles in her work and in the articles that she writes on the WIP. And I've listed some of the titles of some of her articles, though she's written many more for our publication. And one of the things that she told me when I was in Los Angeles was that when she first started, she was the very first female journalist and very first female columnist in the daily English publication Dawn in Pakistan. And when she started and throughout most of her career, one of the things that she realized was when the editors thought that a story wasn't important, they gave it to the women. That was, not important, let the woman write about it. So Zubeida often got those stories. And what she did with those stories stories was told them, whether they were education stories or healthcare stories, she told them within the greater political and social context. And what that did was that made that story important for all readers, not just women readers. It took it out of the realm of women's issues and made it societal. And she does that for the WIP, and all of our writers do that at the WIP. And so it's been a thrill, in fact, to meet Zubeida and to work with people like her on this journey. So, in conclusion, if you're with me, you might be thinking right now, oh great, now I have to be a feminist too. Because I know we're all very busy. And unlike Darius, who yesterday was talking about fear and that when we're passionate, that fear goes away, I don't have that experience. I'm terrified all the time about what I'm doing. And it's actually got in the way sometimes of the success of this organization, because it's not easy when, you know, I wasn't a journalist before this. I wasn't a spokesperson on television. I wasn't a fundraiser before this. I was a school teacher. That's what I did. And that was really easy for me. I started teaching when I was, you know, still in high school as a teacher's assistant. And it was a career I carved out for myself that I felt very comfortable in. And this is very far outside of my comfort zone. So I have to do things to remind myself all the time to keep going and to get out of the way and to not let the fear dominate what I'm doing. So I want to share with you one last quote before I end that I heard when I was hosting an event. The WIP was hosting an event with the Janetta Sagan Fund of Amnesty International. And we were hosting a screening of the film Tapestries of Hope, which exposes the myth in Zimbabwe that having sex with a virgin can cure a man of his AIDS. And so we were screening this film, and before the film, a representative from the Janetta Sagan Fund came, and she talked about Janetta Sagan, and she shared with us a quote that Janetta had written on a piece of paper and kept it with her. And that quote was, "Never forget who you're working for." Now, Janetta put that piece of paper somewhere in her office, maybe on her desk, maybe on the bulletin board, and whenever she got discouraged, she would look at this quote as a reminder to never stop being the voice for the voiceless that she was. And I use that quote all the time. I had to remind myself of that quote this morning, because for me, it's the women who write for the Women's International Perspective. It's the people that they're advocating for in their stories, the men, the women, the children, that they're advocating for in their stories. It's my family, it's my two boys. When I get discouraged and I think, you know, what the heck am I doing? This is crazy. I remember to never forget who I'm working for so I can get out of the way and keep moving forward. Thank you.